It all started 2 years ago, back in June 2017. My wife Lilith and I had been married for 2 years at that point. Overall, it was a good marriage. We loved each other, rarely fought, and loved building a life together. But looking back, I realized that some cracks were beginning to show. That year, I started traveling a lot for work. At first, it was just a few overnight trips a month, but quickly the amount of traveling grew to almost weekly. I hated being away from Lilith so much, but my career was gaining momentum, and these trips were a necessary evil. Or at least that's what I told myself. Meanwhile, Lilith was also spending crazy hours at her job. She's a rising star at a big marketing firm downtown, and her team was working to land a huge client. Between my traveling and her late nights at the office, we often didn't see each other for days at a time. Dates, lazy Sunday afternoons together, even simple rituals like eating dinner together or snuggling up on the couch to watch a show all disappeared as we became more and more focused on our careers. Looking back, I can see how we drifted apart, but in the whirlwind of long hours and constant traveling, I didn't fully realize it at the time. The real warning signs started to appear about a month before I discovered the connection. Lilith became aloof and distracted. She was constantly glued to her phone, but suddenly found herself too busy to answer my calls and texts when I was on the road. Our love front in bed went from passionate to superficial or non-existent. When I'd come home from a trip, eager to reconnect, she'd give me a quick peck on the cheek before claiming she was tired and collapsing into bed. Alone. My mind started thinking of worst-case scenarios, but I tried to rationalize them. I told myself that Lilith was just stressed and overworked, that we would get through this difficult period and things would get back to normal. But then I started noticing little things that seemed unpleasant. When going to work, Lilith started dressing differently, more revealing tight-fitting clothes and high heels instead of her usual casual professional attire. She often worked late, but came home freshly showered. She became protective of her phone, always moving the screen away from my eyes and quickly turning it over when I entered the room. A sense of dread began to build up inside me, but I didn't want to believe it. The woman I loved, the woman I dedicated my life to, couldn't cheat on me. Could she? I had to find out the truth. So one night, I did something I wasn't proud of. While Lilith was in the shower, I guessed the password to unlock her phone. Our anniversary. How ironic is that, really? And started going through her messages and recent calls. My heart dropped into my stomach as I looked through message after message to some guy named Jared. Flirty banter, heartfelt emoticons, references to secret meetings. It was all in freaking black and white. I felt physically ill as I continued to rummage through Lilith's phone. All the clues that were staring me in the face suddenly added up to one disgusting picture. My wife was having an affair. I wanted to scream, to break something, to cry, to confront her immediately and demand an explanation. But I also desperately wanted it to be untrue. I decided I needed indisputable proof, photos or videos, that sort of thing, before I could destroy my marriage. So I devised a plan. I told Lilith that I needed to make an emergency last-minute business trip. She didn't even blink, just nodded absent-mindedly, tapping away on her ubiquitous phone. I threw some things into my bag, gave her a kiss on the cheek that she barely paid attention to, and headed out the door. But I didn't go to the airport. I went to pick up the unremarkable sedan I'd rented the day before and settled in to wait and watch. It didn't take long. Shortly thereafter, Lilith emerged from our house, dressed in a revealing cocktail dress and prancing around in stilettos. She got into her car and drove downtown. I followed her from a distance, my heart pounding and my mind spinning. She pulled up in front of a posh hotel, and I saw a sleek Porsche 911 pull up next to her. A tall, handsome guy, looking to be in his mid-30s, jumped out of the car and greeted her with a long, passionate kiss before they headed, hand in hand, into the hotel lobby. I felt like I was about to throw up. Tears blurred my vision as I pounded my fist on the steering wheel. The pain of betrayal mixed with guilt and insecurity. How could she do this to me? To us? What had I done wrong? Was I not enough for her? In a daze, I drove aimlessly for hours with no destination in mind, just trying to escape the pain that engulfed me. Finally, I found myself on the outskirts of town near a small lake, collapsing on the steering wheel, my body shaken by sobs. A short while later, I was startled by the sound of a knock on my window. A scruffy but kindly older man peered in at me with a concerned expression. He introduced himself as Quentin and asked if I was okay. Through my interrupted breathing, the whole horror story poured out of me. Quentin listened patiently, a look of sympathy on his weathered face. When I finished, he clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "I've been there before, son. You can handle it. Why don't you come over to my place, wipe your tears, and we'll come up with a plan together." Too depressed to argue, I got out of the car and followed Quentin to a small camper trailer parked by the lake. It was cluttered but cozy inside, and Quentin was bustling around making us each mugs of strong coffee. We sat in the dining area, sipping the soothing beverage while I tried to come to grips with my new reality. "First of all, you need to decide how you want to handle this," Quentin said wisely. "Are you going to confront it? Try to deal with it? Walk away?" I shook my head numbly. "I don't know. I can't even imagine talking to her right now without breaking down completely or exploding at her. I think I need some time to get my mind off of it." Quentin nodded. "I understand. You can stay here for a while. Give yourself some space to grieve and consider your next steps." I gratefully accepted his offer. We stayed up late into the night, me pouring out my heart and Quentin offering his hard-won wisdom from his own grief. Over the next few days, I devoted myself to figuring out the logistics of leaving Lilith. Quentin, with his calm demeanor and rational outlook, was a tremendous help in developing a plan. I started by taking inventory of my finances. Luckily, Lilith and I had always kept separate bank accounts and split expenses 50-50, so untangling our money wouldn't be too difficult. I made sure my next paycheck was deposited into a new account in my name only. Then I gathered key documents like my birth certificate, social security card, passport, and a few bank statements, and slipped them into a folder to take to Quentin. I also started slowly moving my clothes and personal belongings into it, in small batches, so Lilith wouldn't notice the missing items. As for relationships, I still wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to go in, tell her about the affair, and demand that she choose between me and her lover. But a bigger part of me recoiled at the thought of going through with it, of seeing her lips lie or make excuses, of potentially hearing her say she didn't want to be with me anymore. Quentin advised me to take the big road. "A big, messy confrontation won't do any good," he advised. "It may feel good to vent your anger on her in the moment, but in the long run it will only cause more painful memories to haunt you. It's best to take a complete break and focus on healing." I knew he was right, so I decided to wait for an opportunity when Lilith would be gone for a while so I could pack up and leave with minimal drama. That opportunity came a week later when she left on a 5-day business trip across the country. The day she left, I took one last look around the house we had lived in for the past 2 years. I wandered through each room, my vision blurred with tears as I took in all the little touches that made this room ours. The framed photos from our adventures together, the kitschy souvenirs from our travels, the furniture we had excitedly chosen as newlyweds, all of it now seemed tainted, a mockery of the love and devotion I thought we had. Strengthening my resolve, I gathered the rest of my belongings, loaded them into the rental truck, and prepared to head to the attorney's office to file for divorce before making my final journey to Quentin. On the kitchen counter, I left my wedding ring on top of a note that simply said, "I know about this affair. I hope it was worth it. Goodbye, Lilith." With a heavy heart and a last look at the life I had left behind, I locked the door and left. I turned off my phone during the drive, not wanting to deal with the inevitable avalanche of calls and texts once she discovered I was gone. In Quentin's cozy trailer, I finally let myself collapse. He held me as I sobbed, lamenting the death of my marriage and the future I thought I would have. But even in the depths of my sorrow, a tiny flame of relief flickered in my chest. I had taken the first painful steps toward a new life. Over the next days and weeks, I dove headfirst into this new reality. I worked remotely at the tiny desk Quentin had set up for me in the trailer. In the evenings, he taught me how to fish in the lake. We would talk for hours, and he would share stories of his triumphs over adversity. Gradually, I began to recover. I ignored Lilith's increasingly desperate attempts to contact me. Quentin, as my unofficial therapist and life coach, urged me to stay out of contact, insisting that I needed to starve old relationships to give room for something new to grow. Then one day, about 2 months after I left, I snuck a surprise into my life. I was sitting on the small deck of Quentin's trailer, sipping my morning coffee and watching the sun glisten on the lake, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up and saw a cloud of dust and a familiar car rushing down the dirt road. My heart clenched, stopped, and Lilith jumped out. She looked awful, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was thick and greasy, her eyes wild and red. She spotted me and rushed over to me, tears already streaming down her face. "Sam! Oh my God, I've been looking everywhere for you!" she shouted, trying to hug me. I recoiled, raising my arms to keep her at a distance. "What are you doing here, Lilith? How did you even find me?" I asked coldly, and my shock was quickly replaced by anger. "I hired a private investigator. I needed to see you, to talk to you. Please, Sam, you have to let me explain," she pleaded. I shook my head. "What are you going to explain? How you cheated on me? How you lied to me for God knows how long? What could you possibly say to make all of this the norm?" Now she began to sob in earnest. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But it's over, I swear. It was a mistake. I love you, Sam. I want to make it right. Please just come home so we can work it out." For a moment I hesitated. I loved this woman with every fiber of my being. The thought of leaving her forever was agonizing. But then I remembered the intimate messages, the secret phone calls, the image of her kissing another man, and my resolve strengthened. "No, Lilith, we're done. You destroyed our marriage and you destroyed my trust in you. There is no coming back from this." Her face crinkled and she reached for me again. "But Sam, I'm your wife. We made vows." I interrupted her sharply. "Vows? You want to talk about vows? What about the vows you took when you left everyone else behind, to be loyal to me? You broke those vows every time you slipped away to be with your lover." "Please, just give me another chance," she whispered. I sighed heavily, suddenly exhausted. "I can't. I won't. It's over, Lilith. I've already filed for divorce. You'll get the papers soon." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "A divorce, but what? Did you really think I'd just forgive and forget? That we could play happy family again, while I always wondered when you'd cheat again?" I ran my hand over my face, my wedding ring no longer clinging to the stubble. "Look, I don't want to drag this out. We've had some good years together, and I'll always be grateful for that. But you made your choice. Now we're both going to have to live with it." Her shoulders slumped in defeat, the struggle leaving her. Is there someone else?" she asked quietly. I thought of Chloe, the pretty barista from the town coffee shop who was flirting with me. I wasn't pursuing anything out of respect for my marriage, but there was a spark, the possibility of something new. "Not yet," I answered honestly. "But they will. I'm going to move on, Lilith. And you need to do the same." She nodded frantically, wiping away her tears. "For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "I know you didn't, but you did. And I can't forget that," I said softly. "Goodbye, Lilith." I knew exactly how much she didn't want to hurt me, that she didn't hide it. With one last agonized look, she turned and ran to her car. I watched until the dust from her tires settled, before returning to the trailer, feeling strangely light and heavy at the same time. Quentin was waiting with a sympathetic smile and a mug of fresh coffee. "You did good, kid. I know it wasn't easy, but you stood up to it. I'm proud of you." I gratefully accepted the coffee, wrapping my arms around the warm ceramic. "What now?" I asked, more to myself than to him, but Quentin answered anyway. Now go on with your life, day by day." After that, life settled into a new normal. The divorce proceedings were, fortunately, quick and uncomplicated. Lilith didn't contest anything, seemingly resigned to the consequences of her actions. We divided our meager assets and parted ways. I fully immersed myself in my work, finding solace in the routine and difficulty of my job. My coworkers, who knew something was wrong but were too polite to ask, rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. Gradually, the sharp, jagged edges of my pain began to smooth out. It helped to be away from the city, away from places that held too many memories. In the peaceful simplicity of living by the lake with Quentin, I found a place for grief, rage, and healing. Quentin was a constant source of strength and wisdom. He seemed to know when to listen to me, when to give me advice, and when to just sit with me in friendly silence. Over fishing rods and an evening beer, he shared his story of grief and betrayal. "You know, I was married once too. he confessed one evening as we sat watching the stars twinkle over the lake. We were high school sweethearts, thought we'd be together forever. He took a big sip of beer before continuing. Until I came home from the service one day and found her in bed with my best friend. Turns out it had been going on for months. I wrinkled my nose in sympathy, knowing all too well the sickening blow of that discovery. What did you do? I asked. Quentin shrugged. Moved out, got divorced, drank myself silly for a while. Thought my life was over. He grinned sadly. But then I picked myself up, shook myself off, and started over. Got a job here, bought this little place, and never looked back. He turned to me, his eyes sparkling with hard-won knowledge. The thing is, Sam, you can't let other people's mistakes define you. You can't let their choices steal your joy, your future. You just have to keep moving forward. Better things will come your way if you let them. His words were memorized for the coming weeks and months as I pondered my future. With time and distance, my perspective began to change. I began to see my marriage to Lilith not as a failure, but as a necessary chapter in the story of my life. Yes, a chapter that ended painfully, but it also taught me profound lessons about love, trust, and my own resilience. And Quentin's prediction began to come true. Better things began to happen on my path. Chloe, a pretty barista, and I started casually dating. It wasn't anything serious, but it was nice to connect with someone new, to feel the first glimmers of possibility and excitement again. My friends, some of whom I had neglected while married, welcomed my return to their ranks with open arms. Weekends were soon filled with barbecues, fishing trips, and spirited games of basketball. Laughter, so absent during those last painful months with Lilith, became an integral part of my life again. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I was promoted at work, a testament to all my hard work and dedication. That same week, Chloe and I had a heart-to-heart talk and decided to take our relationship to the next level by making it official. I felt like I had finally made it and started living a life that was truly mine. I was no longer half of Sam and Lilith, but was fully and confidently just Sam, and that Sam was pretty damn content. But then, on a sunny afternoon, almost 2 years after I found out about Lilith's affair, my phone rang with a message from an unknown number. Frowning with confusion, I opened it. Sam, it's Lilith. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I was hoping we could get together. There's something I really need to tell you. Please, just one conversation, and then I'll leave you alone forever, if that's what you want. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. I was sorely tempted to ignore it and get on with the life I'd built without her. But some tiny, insistent part of me whispered that I needed this closure. I needed to prove to myself that I had truly left our shared past alone. So, taking a deep breath and praying that I hadn't made a huge mistake, I sent back a simple, okay. We met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between town and the lake. When I arrived, she was already there, stirring her drink nervously. She looked well, this I noticed with chagrin. Older, sadder perhaps, but still beautiful. Hi, Sam, she said quietly as I slipped into the booth across from her. Thanks for meeting me. I nodded tensely. What did you want to talk about, Lilith? She took a deep breath, visibly gathering her composure. I wanted to apologize, that's right, face to face. What I did to you was unforgivable. I was selfish and weak, and I hurt you the worst. I'm sorry for that. I digested her words, marveling at the lack of hostility I felt. The anger and bitterness that had once consumed me gave way to distant pain. It was replaced by calm acceptance. I appreciate your apology, I said in an even voice, and I forgive you. Her eyes widened with shock. You do? I shrugged. Holding back my anger was poisoning me. Forgiving you doesn't mean what you did was good. It's just that I've decided to let go of the pain and move on. Tears came to my eyes and flowed down my cheeks. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but thank you. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy under the burden of our story. Finally, Lilith spoke again. I also wanted to tell you that you were right when you said I needed to find someone else to move on. I've been seeing a therapist, working on myself, and I started dating again. Nothing serious, but it's a start. I felt a glimmer of surprise, followed by a surge of genuine joy. That's great, Lilith. I'm genuinely happy for you, she smiled reverently. Have you found anyone? I thought of Chloe, of her warm smile and infectious laugh, of the way she made me feel both down to earth and giddy at the same time. I have it, yeah. It's still pretty new, but it's good. Really good. Lilith reached across the table and squeezed my hand for a moment. I'm glad, Sam. You deserve all the happiness in the world. I pulled my hands from her grasp, saying, Lilith, what are you doing? Not trying to change my mind about you again. I said it's done with us. Then be kind. Keep your distance, and don't you dare push pity. Okay, Sam. She clasped her hands together and lowered them to her knees. If that's all, I'd like to say goodbye and go home. I told her, already starting to want to get away from there as soon as possible. Oh, okay, she replied, getting up from her chair and picking up her bag. Goodbye, Sam. I raised my hand as a sign of goodbye, finishing my coffee and watching out the window as she walked away. In that moment, whatever had been holding me back fell like the hardest chains from my soul. From that moment on, I was no longer worried about anything, and I was ready to go on living without worrying about anything. For the lessons I had learned, for the growth I had achieved, for the beautiful woman in my arms and the bright future stretching before us. Betrayal broke me, but it also remade me, and in the end I became stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of life's blessings. It's been a hell of a journey, but I wouldn't change a thing. If there are people who find themselves in the same situation as me, I would advise them to accept it and let it go without turning it into a Santa Barbara. That it would be calm and easy and pleasant to live without limiting yourself in anything.